Why do the rich keep getting richer? What do successful people do differently? Now, if you've been listening to our regular Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast that we run once a month in between my regular weekly Michael Yardney podcast, you'd know that being rich has little to do with money itself. Instead, it has a lot to do with how you think about money. So if you want to become rich, one of the first steps is to know how the wealthy think about money, how they think differently about it, and how they act around money. And so in this series of podcasts, as part of our monthly Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast, we're doing a series on the success habits of the rich as I go through those with Tom Collie. So welcome once again to this week's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the fifth time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
So to discuss another 10 success habits of the rich people, I've got on the other side of the world my good friend Tom Collie. Hello, Tom.
Hey, Michael, it's good to hear your voice.
Now, over the last couple of months, we've been running through the success habits of the rich, and they've been very, very popular podcasts on both my website and yours and on iTunes. People are clearly wanting to understand what other people do so they can learn some of these things, they can do some of these things. And these come from your studies and my studies. And one of the lessons we learned is successful people ask the right questions, because it's asking the questions is going to give you different answers.
Yeah, I mean, this is all about feedback. So I found feedback is one of the common variables among the wealthy people in my study. They were in constant search for feedback. And the only way you're going to get feedback is by asking people questions, asking them how you're doing, asking them if they can improve on anything, asking them for their thoughts on ideas you have or processes that you're using. By asking the right questions, meaning questions that are laser type questions, specific, not general broad questions, but real specific questions that relate to your business or the dream or the goal that you're pursuing, then the feedback that you get from people allows you to pivot and make adjustments, and that increases your chances of success in your business or realizing your dream or your goals.
Clearly, asking better questions is going to give you better answers, and the better answers you get, the better the results you're going to achieve. We also found that successful people, they've got clarity, they've got certainty, they know what they want, and I guess they also know what they don't want in life.
Yeah, so I just recently wrote about this. This is a really important topic. If you ever remember that movie Trading Places, Michael?
Yes.
With Dan Aykroyd and who was the comedian?
I can't remember, but I can picture him.
Yeah, Murphy.
Yes,
Eddie Murphy. So in that movie, you remember Dan Aykroyd, they set him up to fall on his face. And he's dragged down into the pits of poverty, but he recovers. And one of the reasons he is able to recover is because he had a vision, or he saw himself as a successful commodities broker. If you have a vision of yourself in a specific way where you're a successful person, then no matter what things life throws at you, and adversity is a common denominator among the wealthy, especially the self-made millionaires. You're going to face adversity, but if you have a strong, solid, clear vision of who you are going to be, then that will get you through your adversity. It's very important to have a clear vision.
Well, there's no doubt we all have adversity, so it's good to know where you're heading and also to know what you don't want to do so that you don't get distracted, because there are so many perceived opportunities along the way. Now, one of the common traits of successful people is that they actually know they're lucky, but they think about luck very differently to the poor people. So the poor believe the rich are lucky and they got that way because they're lucky. I think the rich people recognize that they're lucky because they've worked hard and they've made their own luck.
Yeah, so poor people will always throw at you, the ones anyway that hate the rich, will always throw on the wall. They'll say, rich people are rich because they're lucky, and I'm not rich because I'm unlucky. And the fact of the matter is, in part they're right, but they're wrong about the type of luck that rich people have. The poor people are saying basically that rich people are rich because of random good luck. That's the furthest thing from the truth. The rich people create something I call opportunity luck. They create the opportunity for good luck to happen in their lives. And you create that by having, goals that you're pursuing, by taking action on those goals, and by pursuing dreams and taking action on those dreams, and persistently going at it day in and day out, sometimes for years. And eventually, even a blind squirrel finds an acorn. Well, the rich, because they keep at it and they never stop trying, they eventually get lucky. It's just the law of averages. So, they do get lucky, but it's opportunity luck that visits them, not random luck.
I think also because they're educated, they actually know what to look for. They understand an opportunity rather than let it pass them by. So that's probably another of the success traits we should discuss as we're walking through the success habits of the rich people, that they're voracious lifelong learners. They know what to look for because they keep educating themselves. I recently watched that movie about Warren Buffett and just was amazed at how many hours a day he still reads at his stage in life.
Yeah, I know. I've been I've had certain articles that were published by Business Insider and CNBC, and they love to throw Warren Buffett into the articles for some reason. And one of the articles was about how he read almost 6 hours a day. And this is not just reading financials. He's reading an enormous amount of information because he's trying to learn everything he can about companies that he's interested in industries that he's interested in. And here's the important thing. What he's reading is focused on the things that he's doing. So if you want to be successful in life, the important thing is you've got to be reading stuff that is related to what you're doing to try and make more money. You can't, it's important to read to learn, but it's more important to read to learn about the things that you're doing on a daily basis.
So this isn't fiction and the glossy magazines. It's actually reading to educate, to improve yourself. And it's not just reading, I guess. When we talk about educating, it's listening to podcasts like this, it's watching videos, it's reading blogs as well.
That's right. It's the podcast is really growing because it gives people the opportunity to listen to experts and virtuosos while they're doing other things. It allows you to multitask while you're exercising or you're gardening or whatever. So podcasts are becoming a big deal.
Now, another trait of successful people is that they're glass half full people, while I guess a lot of people, unfortunately, see the world as a glass half empty.
Yeah, so I was just, I'm working on an article for CNBC on optimism, and they wanted to more information on how why optimism is even important, why looking at the glass half full is important. And I included a link to a study by MIT where they had looked at individuals and asked them a bunch of questions. And what they found was, in their research, the neurological part, they were doing brain scans on these people. The brain areas of the brains that light up when you're optimistic are the prefrontal cortex. And the area of the brain that lights up when you're negative is something called the cingulate. It's basically the limbic system. And it's two different parts, entirely different parts of the brain. The limbic system is the older, more primitive part of the brain, the subconscious, and and the prefrontal cortex is the newest part of the brain. Well, the prefrontal cortex is your command and control center. It's your executive decision-making center of the brain. So what these rich people have as an advantage, because they're optimistic, is they've got this powerful prefrontal cortex lighting up. And the poor people have this, old vestige of a brain lighting up that doesn't help them in making decisions and seeing opportunities. So yeah, you have to be optimistic because you want to get the right part of the brain working to help you become successful.
Well, clearly, successful people are glass half full people, as we say. They're still practical, though. They're still down to earth. That doesn't mean you're overly optimistic and make stupid blunders, but they seem to have the ability to find the good in everything rather than look for faults, look for problems, look for stumbling blocks and blame other people. To put it another way, the poor focus on obstacles in their way, while the rich people, they focus on the opportunities around them.
Yeah, I come from a background where I had to manage a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of people when I was a tax director. And one of the things that drove me crazy were the people that did nothing but come to me with problems. And I would always say to them, don't come to me with a problem unless you have also a solution to the problem. They didn't want to have to think about the solution. Their brains were kind of in a negative mindset. So they were always in search of problems. And when I confronted them with the need to look for solutions, it was like I put a stop sign in front of them. They didn't even know how to respond to that. So this is an important, variable in success. You have to understand reality. There are going to be problems. You're going to face adversities. There's going to be obstacles, but you don't focus on the obstacles. You focus on the solutions, on ways of getting around the obstacles. If all you do is look for obstacles, guess what you're going to find, Michael? Nothing but obstacles.
Clearly, you find what you look for. I guess the reason we're going through these success habits is to make us, our listeners, think about how we handle the world and the obstacles that come to us, have a look at how other people are doing it, see where we can change, because you don't have to change all your habits, but you've got to start having more success habits. You've got to start having more rich habits and fewer poor habits. Otherwise, it's not going to change, because the world isn't. The world doesn't care about you. It's you who have to change. And I find that many people, they seem to be pleasure junkies. They avoid pain. They avoid discomfort at all costs, while successful people, they do it differently, Tom.
Yeah, and so here's where discipline and willpower and passion, energy come to play. So the human being is hardwired to be lazy. Now, I say that because we're hardwired to conserve energy, and when you're a pleasure junkie, that means you're not thinking. Your brain consumes 20% of the oxygen and 25% of the glucose. So when you're engaging in entertaining activities, you're not really the brain isn't working. So we have a tendency to default into these pleasure modes because the brain doesn't want to work hard. So you have to develop the discipline through habits, creating habits. And here's why habits are so important. In the beginning, forging these habits takes a lot of energy. But once they become habits, then the brain doesn't have to do any work at all. They're automatic. They're unconscious activities. So it's a little bit of an investment up front to develop these, these habits which require a little bit of discipline and willpower. But once they're developed, then you're actually taking advantage of the human nature, which is the default mode of conserving energy.
Now, clearly, we're not saying don't have fun, don't relax, don't turn off. You can't. You've got to have a balance in your life. But successful people understand the value. They understand the benefits of working through tough things that most others avoid. Now, one of the other traits of successful people that comes up over and over again is that people's self-worth. Poor people believe they aren't worthy of wealth. And your self-worth tends to end up being equivalent in some ways to your net worth.
Yeah, and this is where I talk a lot about this, and so do you. These limiting beliefs, these negative limiting beliefs that we get programmed into our brains at an early age. Because let's face it, Michael, most people come from two places: poverty or the middle class. There aren't many people that are born wealthy and stay wealthy. There's maybe there's 5% of the population at most. So most people are coming from two places that have a lot of limiting beliefs and that they're raised in. It's hard to make money. You hear it growing up, how hard it is you have to work hard to make money, and you have to, and oftentimes in these households, these poor, especially the poor households, you hear how, if we didn't have bad luck, we wouldn't have any luck at all. And that kind of nonsense. Well, that, becomes programming in your brain, and you start to develop a mindset really that it's impossible for you to become wealthy because of X, Y, and Z. You've got to get rid of those limiting beliefs. I have so much research data. I keep a file that's probably 3 inches thick of people, millionaires and billionaires, who came from poverty. So my question to you is, if a poor person can become a billionaire, why can't you?
Sure.
I mean,
the rich people believe that the successful people believe they deserve it. So part of the reason we're discussing these, of course, Tom, is the first part is to actually recognize your unproductive beliefs, to recognize your poor habits. Then you've got to remove them, and then you've got to replace them with rich habits. That's the reason we're going through all this. If you don't know about these, if you don't hear about these, there's no way you'd recognize it. I think another trait of successful people that gets them through is that they're adaptable. They embrace change. I mean, most of us don't like change to some degree because it's uncomfortable. The more in control you are of all elements of your life, the better you feel. But change is going to occur, so why not be adaptable, Tom?
Well, one of the things that I learned from my research is that the wealthy people, most of them didn't start out wealthy. They grew into being wealthy people. And I emphasize the word grow in that regard because they forced themselves to change from the person they were to the person they wanted to be. And that change always involves growth. So you have to get comfortable with growth, and you have to get comfortable with change, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in life. You're going to be stuck in the middle class or in poverty.
Now, clearly, a lot of these habits that we're talking about, these success habits, are in our book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, and I'd commend anyone who's interested in improving themselves to read Rich Habits, Poor Habits, that you can get at richhabitspoorhabits.com. You can get it online on Amazon or in good bookstores as well. But it's actually the culmination of your many, many years of study and my 10 years of mentoring successful and maybe some not successful people where we've learned these things. The last one I'd like to discuss in this particular podcast, Tom, is the concept that the poor often resent successful people and the rich people. Now, we have a particular name for it in Australia that, in fact, I know when I first discussed it with you, it was unusual. So we're even worse in Australia than you are back in the United States. Here they call it the tall poppy syndrome, where the poppy that stands out in the poppy field that sticks up gets its head lopped off or chopped off by the whether it's the wind or the grazier or whatever that does it. So people seem to be jealous and resentful. Successful people don't feel that way, though, do they?
They don't. And, we had in 2011 this thing called the Occupy Wall Street. I don't know if you remember that.
That's right, yeah.
It was such a big deal, and it was in the media, was promoting it. Oh, these are heroes, these people that claim to be the 99%ers. They were standing up to the 1%. And it was really all about socialism. It was, in my opinion, it was about they just did not like the fact that rich people existed, and they felt that everyone should have everything that they wanted. And, that's doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. And it's a problem in America, just like it's a problem in Australia. And it comes, I think, from the media, and I also think it comes from politicians. But even more frightening, I think it's being taught to kids in our school system, at least here in the United States, that rich people are evil and greedy. And boy, what message does that send, Michael, to these kids? It sends a message that don't pursue wealth, because if you do, you're going to be evil and greedy.
And if you're a nice person and you don't want to be evil and greedy, that's going to stop you. And that's unfortunately one of those disempowering beliefs. Here in Australia, there's a tendency that people are looking currently for the property market to collapse. Those who've worked hard, who've saved, who've actually taken the trouble to buy some real estate and secure their financial future, people are hoping, wishing bad luck on them. And is that much the same with the stock market as well, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, it's this. They're envious because they don't have what the upper middle class or the rich people have. Maybe they've got $1 million in their 401k, or they have a couple of $1 million in the bank, and they're more than happy to see them lose all of that because it puts them on equal footing. It takes them down a notch, and it makes the poor people, the type of poor people who hate the rich, it makes them feel better about themselves. It makes them not feel as inferior. I think because they have inferiority complexes.
That's what it is. It goes back to what we said before about your self-worth as well. On the other hand, rich people, they admire successful people. They admire rich people. They're happy to see other people's success. They're not jealous because they think, if he can do it, so can I. Well, we've just gone through 10 more of the success habits of people who've achieved more in life. And I hope that people who are listening to this podcast have got some benefit from it. So can we come back again real soon and do this once more, Tom?
I can't wait, Michael. I love doing these with you.
Thank you. Well, that's it for another Rich Habits, Poor Habits show. Remember, we do this once a month. And in between, every week, I have my regular Michael Yardney podcast. But the reason we're putting these Rich Habits, Poor Habits shows together is because I want you to learn about your empowering beliefs, your rich habits, as well as your disempowering beliefs, your poor habits. Because, look, let's be honest, not all rich people are successful and not all successful people are rich. And I'm not making a judgment when I call people rich or people poor, but the terms I'm using are to clarify the different ways of thinking that 1% of us have compared to the majority of the population. And after studying the rich and after studying the successful people for over 30 years now, and having mentored over 2,500 successful and some not so successful investors, business people and entrepreneurs, I've noticed that all rich people have more of these positive habits, these success habits, than the average person. And that's why we're running this series of podcasts within the Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast of the success habits of the rich. I hope you got lots out of it today. And if you did, why not pass the message on to somebody else? Share this through Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, however you listen to it, also through your podcast app, because we'd like to help more people become the 1% and not be floundering amongst the poor. Look forward to catching up with you again next week for the Michael Yardney podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favorite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?